So let's talk about The Light Between Oceans. Interestingly, this movie is really not taking off with any sort of audience. This was my number 3 anticipated movie of 2016, and when I left the theater, I was confused for one reason. I'm confused why the general public isn't celebrating this film. Not only is it a great film, but I think it should be celebrated for the fact that this isn't supposed to be an Oscar movie. It's just a movie, and it's good, and it's trying something new. For those of you that don't know, The Light Between Oceans is about Tom, played by Michael Fassbender, who is a World War I veteran, and he takes a post at a lighthouse far away from any other humans for months at a time just to simply get away and be isolated and not hurt anyone, because that's how he has been scarred by the First World War. It's like being a fly on the wall for when like a really great couple meets for the first time, you know? Like you're being invited into something really like tender and really cute that you wouldn't get to see in real life. Later along the line, they come upon a baby in a boat that has been lost at sea, and they take the baby as their own because they're conflicted on what the right thing to do is, and they decide together that the right thing to do is to nurture the child and raise them as their own. And one thing leads to another, and it's discovered that Hannah, played by Rachel Weisz, is the mother of this child that was lost at sea, like the rightful mother. And essentially the rest of the movie is the characters talking about what the right thing is to do, and the three of them taking different actions and tactics towards what they think is right. I don't really understand what the criticisms are of this movie, because I really applaud how much it's trying something new. If you watch any interviews with the cast or the director of this film, you will see that one of the first things that they all mention is that this movie does not have an antagonist. It doesn't have a bad guy. It's just a moral dilemma with a bunch of people who are trying to do the right thing. And I think it's brilliant that that optimism and morality is balanced out by how depressing of a story it is. The Light Between Oceans is brilliantly structured until it's not so much brilliantly structured. What I mean by that is that there's a great structure of an event being placed in front of three different characters. Three different characters dealing with that event in their own specific way in accordance to their character and their motivation that has been established in the first act of the movie. And the conflict, the main conflict of the movie, arises from the difference of how these characters deal with a situation. It's different from a more typical structure of a movie, being that there isn't a bad guy and an antagonist is working in exact opposition to our protagonist's desires. It's not opposing one another in a sense. And what I mean by it not being brilliantly structured sometimes is I think that the director loses grasp on what's really important a little bit towards the third act. It's a character film. Everything that I described about the structure of this movie and everything that has to do with the synopsis suggests that it's a strong character movie and that it doesn't have to be so plotty. There doesn't have to be so many twists and turns in the plot, because what we really want are just strong character moments to punctuate this development. And I think for that reason, especially the third act is a little bit plotty, it's a little bit here and there, and it's a little bit fast. I don't think a lot of other film enthusiasts are going to see this movie and say that it was too fast, but that's what I think. The acting is of course phenomenal. Michael Fassbender and Alicia Vikander are two of the best working in the business today. That being said, it's not either of their best performances. It's not in the top percentile of their best performances. Their chemistry is great, but what I think was missing was maybe one or two scenes that were more drawn out, had more to them, were more dialogue heavy, were more combative. In a sprawling epic movie like this, what can be lost is these really punctuated moments, you know, the exclamation points within the paragraph that is this movie. For example, one of my favorite movies, The Godfather Part 2, is a big, sprawling movie with many locations, many scenes. It takes place over many, many years. But there are like 3 or 4 scenes in that movie that stand out because they are just fantastically grounded in that moment. They're the exclamation points of the conflict of the movie, where The Light Between the Oceans sometimes feels like a series of commas. It's not so much that there's a great variety of punctuation. It's just that it kind of goes and goes and goes. It's like a run on sentence. To give criticisms to a film that we don't give to films anymore, criticism that we would give to films back in the 70s or the 60s or the 50s when we had these big sprawling epics that were purely character and not so much just fucking action all the time. That being said, I think that I have one big issue with this movie, and that it's 10 or 15 minutes too long. There's a series of scenes at the end which I actively did not want to be in the movie. I felt that all the character arcs, there were 3 or 4 character arcs that summed up very well. They were good character arcs, and I was pleased, and then the movie went on for like 10 or 15 minutes more. Is it going to be one of the better films of this year? Probably not. Is it the best film of Derek Cianfrance's filmography? It's not. Blue Valentine and Place Beyond the Pines are better, but it still needs to be talked about. That doesn't mean that it's a bad movie, and what we should be celebrating is that this is a movie that is in our mainstream, or at least should be in our mainstream. It's not a bunch of small studios coming together to try to win a bunch of Oscars. It's just talented people that were hired by a big studio to make a good film. The Light Between Oceans is an 8 out of 10, and it deserves your attention. Yes, The Light Between the Oceans has some flaws. It's not perfect. But I'd so much rather see this movie than another fucking reboot or fucking superhero sequel. Let me know what you think about the movie, the story, the implications of the story, because I found this to be a very thought-provoking film. I want to talk about it with people, but nobody's talking about this movie, and it's pissing me off. Like and subscribe!